Hello, my name is Aviva, and today I have some forced proximity romance recommendations for you. So the forced proximity trope is pretty simple, but also kind of vague. It's kind of just when two people, for whatever reason, are forced to be next to each other. They're kind of like forced into each other's proximity. And I'm a big fan of this because I really like when I'm reading a romance for the romance to be like the main idea. Like if you're having a story and then there's a romance going on the sideline, you could come across a book that has like 2 or 3 chapters in between of the characters actually interacting. And I'm a big fan of like every single chapter, the characters are interacting or thinking about each other or something like that. And when you have the forced proximity trope, usually that's going to happen more often or not. So therefore, I'm a huge fan of this. So first up, I have Broken French by Tasha Boyd. So this isn't like my favorite from the stack. I don't really know which one's my favorite. I have so many here, but this was a pretty solid read. I read it recently and it's basically about this girl who just quit her job in this like architecture firm. She's like an architect or whatever. And basically her best friend and roommate owns this nanny company where she sets up really good nannies with like really wealthy people. And basically this guy in France needs a nanny for his daughter. He's a single dad and they're about to take this like month boat trip. And basically this girl who just quit her job is going to decide to take this nannying position because her friend is having a really hard time finding someone like such last minute and whatever. And basically once she gets there, she's basically going to be stuck on his yacht, boat, whatever you want to call it, with his daughter, and she's going to babysit her all the time. And they're basically going to be forced into each other's proximity because they're living on a boat together. So it's really good. I was a big fan. It also had a little bit of like that forbiddenness because she's working for him and they don't want to cross that line, but they're very attracted to each other. And like there's a lot more going on in this book. They're like in the south of France, touring all these places, and like she's really into architecture, so it has like a very like textured feel to it. Like you get to like kind of go on vacation with them. So I was a big fan of this. And if you're into forced proximity with like a billionaire sort of romance, like one of them is really rich, I know that's like a big thing, then I recommend this one. Next, I have The Roommate by Rosie Danan. So this is actually a pretty steamy book. It was very surrounded by the porn industry and porn in general because one of the main characters is a porn star. It's basically about this girl. She's like a New York City socialite and she decides to like follow her crush all the way to LA for the summer. And she was supposed to be like rooming with him in like his family's apartment or something. And when she gets there, she finds out that this guy is actually not gonna be there and she's gonna have to room with like somebody else that rented the room that he was supposed to be staying in. And anyway, she's gonna soon find out that this guy is a porn star and they are going to form an unlikely friendship and obviously going to be attracted to each other, and then obviously a romance is going to bloom. So, forced proximity because they're kind of forced into being roommates with each other. Like this guy just, rented a random apartment and like this girl wasn't really supposed to be there and she's stuck in this guy's apartment. And, basically it's a forced proximity. It's pretty steamy. You're dealing with a porn star and a New York City socialite, and it's really good. Next, I have Make It Sweet by Kristen Callahan. So this is about a girl who is kind of like Khaleesi from Game of Thrones. She was like a very famous actress on this really big TV show. And basically, she finds out that her character is being killed off. And on the same day, she also finds out that her boyfriend has been cheating on her. So she kind of like freaks out and is like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? My life is like falling apart. So she decides to go to this like retreat sort of place that her grandmother, told her about. And when she gets there, she meets this guy who happens to be an ex-hockey player. He recently had to quit playing pro hockey because he was getting injured a lot, and it's like you can either die or you can stop playing. So he decided that for now he's going to stop playing. So they're both kind of like in different headspaces. They don't really want to have anything to do with each other, but they're both on this estate together, and therefore they're like forced into each other's proximity. And obviously a romance is going to bloom because they're both really attracted to each other and they can't seem to stay out of each other's way. So this is really good. I very much enjoyed it and I obviously highly recommend it. Next, I have The Real Deal by Lauren Blakely. So this is actually mostly a fake dating book, but it happens to have a forced proximity trope in it. And I'm a huge fan of this book, so therefore I really wanted to add it into this video. It's basically about this girl who has to go home to like this family event. And if she goes home alone, then her family's gonna try to like set her up with like all these guys from her small town. And she's seriously not interested because she's really happy like living in the city that she's living in. So she basically decides to hire this guy to be her fake boyfriend. And she's gonna take him home and they're basically going going to be sharing a room together because her family thinks that they're dating. And basically they're gonna have to pretend to be really in love around her family for her like weekend event that they're having. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, I really liked it because they were forced to like be close to each other this whole time, and like it got really steamy. They started like role playing with each other to like get into character, and honestly I had a blush on my face like the whole time I was reading this book. So I was a big fan of this, and therefore if you're into fake dating, forced proximity, really steamy books, I recommend this one. Next up, I have The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, which is another fake dating trope, but it also happens to have that forced proximity thing going on. It's basically about these two people whose siblings are getting married, and these two people, they've never really gone along. They've obviously hung out with each other a lot in the past because their siblings have been dating for a really long time. And anyway, they all go to this wedding, and every single person decides for them to end up getting food poisoning. And this girl who is getting married happened to have won this honeymoon giveaway, and she's like, look, you two should go on my honeymoon, because if not, it's going to go to waste, because obviously I can't go on it. And for whatever reason, they both decide like, okay, sure, we're going to go on the honeymoon, except they both have to pretend to be married to each other, because if not, then they're going to actually have to like pay for the entire honeymoon, because they obviously want a giveaway, so it's supposed to be for newlyweds. So basically they're going to go to Hawaii, and they're going to have to pretend to be their siblings, and they're going to have to share a hotel room together, and they're going to have to go on all of these like honeymoonish things that like the hotel like set up for them. Like they're going to have to do like, you know, a couples massage, and they're going to have to like do all of these things together. So it has a very big forced proximity thing going on, but then it also has this like enemies to lovers thing because they've never really gone along. And then there's also like the fake dating, fake marriage thing. So basically this is a bundle of good tropes, and I recommend it. Next, I have another Christina Lauren recommendation, which is The Honey Don't List. And this is basically about these two people who work for this very famous couple, and they're both like assistant to the couple. So like there's a girl who's an assistant to the girl, and then a guy who is an assistant to the guy. And basically this couple is about to go on this trip to promote their new book that is like a relationship book. The only problem is that this couple is actually like not getting along. They're having a really bad marriage in private. So these two assistants are going to have to make sure that they stay under wraps so that nobody finds out that, you know, this whole marriage and this whole book of relationships is like a big sham and everything. So they're going to be forced to hang out with each other a lot because they're on this tour bus, and obviously, you know, they're both dealing with this couple, so they're always in each other's faces. And it's basically a really fun book. It's actually a little bit different and more textured than I'm making it seem, but basically it's a really fun time. It has this forced proximity thing going on. It's also like a workplace environment sort of thing. And it's funny because you're dealing with these two people who don't necessarily get along, the assistants, and yet they're gonna slowly like have a romance bloom. And then you're also dealing with this couple that aren't getting along but are actually married, and you're seeing their romance and their marriage kind of like fall apart in front of your eyes. So it has this like double element of a romance going on, and basically I was a huge fan of this book. Next up, I have The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. So this is basically about a girl who is a wedding planner, and 3 years ago she got stood up at the altar because her brother-in-law to be kind of convinced her ex-fiance to break off the wedding. And she obviously has very hard feelings towards both of them, but it's basically 3 years later, and she's applying to be the wedding planner for this fancy hotel, and happens to be the ex-fiance and the brother-in-law are marketing people, and they're applying to be the marketing managers for this hotel. And basically they both get set up to have to work with each other to see like who can come up with like the better idea for like, I don't know, a marketing strategy for this wedding planning business for this hotel. So the girl ends up having to work with the brother-in-law, and then the fiance is going to be working with like another wedding planner, and they're going to be working against each other to see who's going to end up getting the job. It's like a whole thing. But anyway, she's basically forced to work with her ex-brother-in-law, and they're basically forced into each other's proximity because they have to make this presentation together, and they obviously very much hate each other because, you know, he's the reason that her wedding got broken off. So, you know, it's basically really good. It's got like a little bit of that enemies to lovers vibe, and anyway, I highly recommend it. Next, I have Anything You Can Do by R.S. Gray. So this is a really cute, quick rom-com. It's a pretty tiny book, and it just like put a smile on my face the whole time. Everything by R.S. Gray, I'm a huge fan of. I've read a lot of her books, and this is basically basically an enemies to lovers workplace environment forced proximity book. It's got a lot of tropes in here. It's basically about these two people who grew up next to each other. They've always been pitted against each other. They never really got along or anything like that. Literally the entire town, they live in this tiny town, and the entire town knows that these two people absolutely hate each other. And basically now they're both adults and they're kind of both moving back to this small town because they're both doctors and they're both about to start working at this one family practice doctor's office that's in town because the doctor is about to retire, and they both basically got offered to come and be the doctors in this office and potentially, inherit the practice. And so now they're both forced to work with each other. They're kind of like butting heads because they obviously both want to inherit this doctor's job, whatever it is. And now they are forced to work with each other. They're forced in the same proximity. They're going to be, very much in each other's faces. And basically, I was a huge fan of this book. And if you like all of the tropes that I mentioned, I highly recommend this one. Next up, I have another book by R.S. Gray, which is called Make Me Bad. And this is basically about this really good girl. She's like a virgin. Her father's like the sheriff of the town. So like nobody was ever able to get close to her, like boy wise. And she basically like works in this library in like the children's section. And for whatever reason, this guy is going to end up getting community service. He's like a really wealthy guy that like everybody knows in the town. He's obviously really good looking. And anyway, he's going to choose to take his community service and work for this public library. And obviously now she's going to have to take care of him and give him things to do because he is like, set to work in her part of the library. And basically they're going to start to like hang out a lot. They're forced obviously into each other's faces because he has to be there and it's her job. So she's always there. And basically she's going to be like, look, I know you're kind of like a bad guy and like you have a bad reputation and like you're this really rich guy that like, does a lot of stuff. And I was wondering if you would help me become bad because I'm such a prude and I don't really know how to do anything bad. So since we're hanging out with each other, can you make me bad? And so he's going to be like, okay, sure. And then the story's going to go from there. So it's really cute. I very much liked the circumstances as to how they got themselves into the entire situation. So I was a big fan. It was really cute. And basically, I recommend it. Next up, I have one more book by R.S. Gray, which is Cold Hearted Boss. So this is basically about this girl who kind of steals this guy's wallet in a bar one night. And basically a month later, she is now applying for this job on like this construction crew because she really needs the money and they're paying really well. But she doesn't want to like, not get the job because she's a girl. So she kind of like dresses up as this guy. And basically when she's in line to like apply for this job and like hand in her application, this guy who is running the job notices her. And you want to know why? It's because it's the guy that she stole the wallet from a month ago. And basically he kind of hires her because he wants to mess with her and get back at her for stealing his wallet. So basically she's going to get the job and then they're actually going to be forced to share a cabin with each other. He kind of sets up that she's going to be living with him because this job is like kind of out of town. So they kind of like give everybody a place to stay while they're working on the job site sort of thing. So it has a very much forced proximity thing going on. And also like it has this whole enemies and like I'm kind of mad at you and I'm going to get back at you sort of thing. So this one was a really fun time. It was actually my favorite from all three of the R.S. Grays I mentioned. So basically, obviously, I highly recommend it. Next, I have Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. So this is a really popular book, but is also pretty taboo. It is a pretty big age gap romance. It's basically about this girl who is going to end up having a romance with her boyfriend's father. And she's like 19 years old and the father I think is like 37 or 38 or something like that. So it's pretty taboo. And honestly, the book kind of made me a little bit uncomfortable, but I know that so many people are like really into age gaps and really into taboo and really like Penelope Douglas as well as this book. So I couldn't help but put it into this entire recommendation video because it definitely has that forced proximity trope. But I'm just saying, even though I did enjoy reading this, it also made me slightly uncomfortable. So like, if you don't end up liking it, not so much my fault. But basically this girl is going to end up moving in with her boyfriend's father because they're kind of like out of money and they need a place to stay. So the father is going to like take them in. And obviously once they're living in the same house together, a romance is going to bloom. So I'm not going to give you any more information than that. I think it's definitely a book where you just should like jump into and see how it goes, but it's definitely an interesting time. Next, I have Throttled by Lauren Asher. So this is actually the first book in the Dirty Air Companion series, which is a race car driving series. So there's 4 books, and each book is following a different romance, and this is the first one in the series. So in this one, you are following Maya and Noah, and Noah is a famous race car driver, and Maya is the sister to a race car driver that just joined Noah's team. It happens to be Noah and this girl's brother don't get along really well because they have some beef from the past. And anyway, Maya is kind of like coming on tour with them for the summer as they do all of their race car, whatever you want to call it. So it's got that forced proximity because they're always in each other's faces because, he's a race car driver and they keep going to events and Maya is always there. But then there's also this forbidden romance aspect going on because her brother and him don't get along really well. So they seriously cannot start a thing because a lot of problems could lead there, and basically it's really fun. I very much enjoyed it, and if you're into sports romances, race car drivers, stuff like that, I recommend this one. Next, I have 2 books that are super similar to each other, but they're both absolutely amazing, so I wanted to share both of them with you. The first one is The Darkest Temptation by Danielle Laurie. So this is the 3rd book in the Maid series, and then I also have The Stolen Hair by Sophie Lark. So this is the 2nd book in the Broken Birthright series, and both of these are Mafia companion series. This one has 6 books in it, and this one has 3 books, but I'm pretty sure a 4th one's gonna come out, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, both of these books are kidnapping mafia romances. So in both of these books, this guy kidnaps this girl for whatever reason, and they're basically both going to have this forced proximity thing because they're both stuck in this house together because this guy kidnapped her and therefore is hiding her away and always keeping an eye on her and things like that. And obviously a romance is going to bloom in a very Stockholm syndrome way. So both of these books come with a lot of trigger warnings that I recommend you looking up yourself if you are interested in this and you have anything you gotta look out for. They're both obviously dark mafia romances, so a lot naturally comes with that. But basically, if it sounds like something up your alley and you're into that whole forced proximity thing, then these are actually, I think, 2 of my favorites from this entire stack. Next up, I have a few YA romances to share with you. Everything that I spoke about already were all adult romances, so the rest are going to be YA. But anyway, next I have Starry Eyes by Jen Bennett. So this is basically about these 2 people who used to be best friends growing up, and then something happened. I don't even remember what it was. I read this book so long ago, and now I can't remember what that whole thing was. But anyway, they stopped talking for a couple of years, and now they don't really get along. They try to avoid each other whenever they can, and they both end up getting invited to go on this camping trip with their mutual friends. So they both end up going along, and for whatever reason, they basically get stuck in middle of nowhere together, just the 2 of them. Obviously, they're on this camping trip, so they're in the middle of the woods, and basically once they're alone together, they kind of have to hash out their problems. So it's got this whole forced proximity thing because they're camping in the middle of the woods alone, and obviously once they're together, they're going to have to start talking. So it has this whole I guess best friends to strangers to lovers thing going on, and I was just a huge fan of this one. Next up, I have By Your Side by Casey West. So this one was really cute too. I was a huge fan of this. It's basically about this girl who ends up getting stuck in the library over a very long weekend. And basically she soon finds out that she's not alone. She's actually stuck in the library with this guy who she goes to school with, but she never really talked to before because he's kind of the weird outcast kid and she's the popular girl in school. And basically, since they're forced to be in the same library together for 3 days straight, they're gonna end up hanging out and they're gonna realize that maybe, they could be friends and maybe they actually really hanging out with each other, even though they never would have talked if they weren't forced into each other's proximity because, different social circles and everything. And basically, it's a really fun story and it goes way further than that, but I'm not sure what it says on the back of the book. So I don't really want to give away any spoilers, but it's basically they're going to become friends and then they're going to have to try to see how they can keep their friendship once, all of their friends are involved and the social society of high school starts butt into their business. So basically it's a really fun book. And if you're into YA cute romances, I highly recommend this one. And the last books that I wanted to share with you are actually all from the same companion series. So I have Stay With Me, Watch Over Me, and then Fall Into Me, which is the 2nd, 4th, and 5th book in the Come Back to Me series by Mila Grace. So all of these books are kind of military-based romances. They're all companion books, so therefore you can read just one if if you want to, but if you read all of them, then you'll see like, you know, some overlapping characters and stuff like that. But basically they all have a military theme going on. All of the guys are either in the military, was in the military, on leave from the military, something like that. And then the girl obviously comes into the story somehow. So basically the first book, which is Stay With Me, is about this guy who recently got blind, and he's now in this like rehabilitation center for soldiers because, you know, he got blind while like, you know, working, and now he's in a very bad mood and nobody wants to talk to him, and he basically is just trying to get better. And this girl is interning at this wellness place because, you know, she wants to become, I think, like a psychologist or something like that. So she's interning there because I think her father like works there or is somehow involved in the military. I don't remember, but it doesn't really matter. But anyway, this girl is going to like kind of crack this guy out of his shell, and she's going to start talking to him and like getting him to open up, and they're going to become friends, and obviously a romance is going to bloom between the two of them. So this one has some trigger warnings for like PTSD and suicide and things along those lines. So I recommend going into this one wary if you are, you know, triggered by stuff like that, but I very much liked this one. Then I have Watch Over Me, which is honestly like my least favorite one from this whole series, but I still really liked it. It was just like on the totem pole of all like perfect books. This one was my least favorite, but mostly just because of the actual storyline. So this is about this girl who has a very abusive father, and he was actually in jail for a while, and she finds out that he recently got out of jail and is kind of like coming after them and like wants to kill them because, you know, they're the reason that like he got himself into jail. I mean, it's his fault, but like he blames them. So basically she calls up her brother, who happens to be in the military, and her brother is like, look, I can't take care of you right now because I'm in the middle of work, but I have this friend who is going to come and get you and is going to protect you. So this guy, who is the brother's best friend, basically comes and takes them and takes care of them and hides them out and stuff like that. And he, I believe, is like a Coast Guard, so it's part of the military, but like whatever. Anyway, he's basically going to watch over them. And the reason why this was my least favorite from all of these books is because it has, first of all, gun violence, which is a trigger warning. So not that like I have a like particular trigger warning towards that, but I just wasn't the hugest fan of the fact that like this girl was like hiding out and like was very scared and always like looking behind her back and worried that like her father was gonna like pop out of left field sort of thing. But I did very much enjoy the whole like bodyguard vibes that this one had because, you know, he was watching over her the whole time and making sure that she was safe and everything like that. So basically, I very much like this, and it definitely has that forced proximity thing going on because like he is like, you know, watching over them the whole time. And the last one that I'm going to share with you is Fall Into Me, which is a bodyguard romance. So this girl is really famous, and she basically needs a bodyguard because she started getting all of these like, you know, stalker, I want to kill you or something sort of vibes. Like she started getting like hate mail and things like that, and her family got really nervous. So they hired this bodyguard who happens to have just gotten out of the military. So he needed a job, so he takes this job, and he basically has to follow this girl around all the time. So it's that bodyguard romance, which obviously comes with forced proximity because they're forced to be in each other's faces the whole time. So I very much liked this. This was actually the first one that I read from the series. I first found this book and I very much liked it. And after I read it, I found out that it's actually the 5th book in a series. So then I went back and read the whole series in order. So I first read book 5, loved it so much that it went and made me go and get all the other 4 books. So I highly recommend this one if you're into bodyguard romances, forced proximity, one person is famous sort of trope. I recommend this book. But anyway, that's it. That is all the forced proximity books that I have to share with you for now. I'll probably make another list in the future. But anyway, if you very much liked this video and you wanted to see more trope romance recommendation books, then I'm going to make sure to have a playlist linked down below of all of like my romance recommendations. I've already done like Enemies to Lovers and Grumpy Sunshine and a couple of others that I can't think of off the top of my head. But basically, if you want more recommendations, I'm going to make sure that that playlist is linked down below. Also, if you wanted to check out any of the books that I mentioned in this video, they're all going to be in the description. If you wanted to check out the affiliate links, I'm going to have them all linked to Amazon. But anyway, I am curious to know if you have any other forced proximity trope books for me that I didn't mention in this video. I'm always looking for some good recommendations, so please leave me a comment down below. But anyway, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not currently subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. And anyway, thank you for watching this video, and until next time, enjoy reading.